Alright, so I want to show you this project inspired from this really interesting artist named Sophie Parker. Sophie Parker. You can find her online, on Pinterest. She does these really cool retro plants. Retro plants. And she does these really interesting combinations with it. Now, in class, I had the kids do it as a drawing project. Um, and they can also do the extra credit version of it. And so this is kind of the craft version of that drawing project, which you can find on the website, right? It's under Retro Houseplants, and it's for intermediate art. So these are just these simple plastic plants that you can find at different hobby stores, right? The paint sometimes gets onto the other side, just like this, and if you could scrape it off, that is great, although if you have to use some green paint later to cover it up, that's another option for you, okay? You can stick to just flat colors like this and then put designs in, or do a gradation. Now for this one, that's the part I'm going to demo, is how to do the gradation, because most people understand how to do a flat color. But how do you get started? I do recommend using a white paint and go ahead and paint in the sections that you're going to paint over twice. So paint in one layer, let it dry, then put in the second coat. Okay? Let that dry. And then it's easier to create the more vibrant colors. I'm using colors that you typically found from the 1980s because that's what this whole project is inspired from, are those cool retro plants from the 80s, and then using those colors. There's other types of plants that you can find, just like this one. This one was an easier one to use, and this is a finished one. If you just wanted to do flat color like this, that's great. And then I used a glazing medium over it to finish the piece. I also went on the back to paint in the parts I messed up and did that green. Okay. You could also find some of the flowers that you found with those typical retro plants, right, from the 80s. There seemed to be these type of house plants that are all around the house growing up, and these were one of them, right? And so this one I made sure to paint twice. You can see it was red before. I'm sure there's white versions out there, but when I was at the store, that's what they had. So I painted this with white twice, and then I did kind of this pastel peachy tone, and then of course the fuchsia and that aqua color. Very 80s. Okay. So this one's essentially done. I just have to put the gel medium on it, right? So, but I want to show you how to do a gradation. So let me move on to, whoops, this one's going to fall. Okay. All right, so this one I already painted in the sections, right? And here you can see I started a gradation, but anyone that's ever done gradations before, that means going from one color to the next in an even fade. Right now it's kind of chunky, right? It's kind of stripy. And I did that because I needed to get a few layers in before I had to actually do the fading. Alright, so I have my colors here, right? So my blues, my turquoise. Looks like I need a little more yellow though. Let's get that in. Alright, you probably didn't see my colors, but here's my colors. The turquoise, the blue, and that yellow. Now you may think, well, I'll just mix it in between. Anybody that's ever had to paint gradations, it is a challenge because gradations are kind of a pain. You have to keep going back and over it. I'm only going to do this one section. So this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to start by putting in my yellow. Okay. Alright. Then, with my paint palette, I'm going to take some yellow, put it to the side, some of that blue, and mix it. Alright. Right? See, that looks like it's on its way to the blue, but it's not there yet. I'm going to take that color, while this is still wet, put it right next to it. For people in the art field, they know what this is. It's wet into wet, right? So what's really important to mix in between those two sections, this yellow and that green, I have to rinse out my brush, dry out the brush. If you have to kind of squeegee it out, do that. And then go in between the two and kind of mix it right there. If you have to use your finger to kind of dab, do so. Okay. Sometimes you have to go back and forth, right? Back and forth. Alright, so now that I have those two ready, I'm going to take some of this color, I'm scooping it, putting it over here. I'm going to take some of that blue and mix it. See? Yellow, kind of greenish, more green, right? We're getting closer to that tone. And while that one's still wet, I'm going to go right here and go right next to it. If you remember before, I have to dry out my brush, clean it up, squeegee it if I have to. That extra water can make it not blend very well. Kind of go in between those two colors and stripe it up. Okay, it's starting to look like a fade. Better than that, right? Yuck. Okay. While that's still wet, I'm going to take some of this color, kind of move it to the side here, add more blue. Now look, it's starting to create those value changes. Yellow, yellow, green, green, blue, green, blue. That's your full range. All right. While that color's still wet, put this one next. See that? If it's hard to see, I'm going to try to, sorry, there's not a lot of space right there. See, it's starting to look like they're going into each other. Now you can see why I had to have that base in to make it work. Otherwise what happens is it creates a transparent look and you end up still seeing some of the green from underneath. Alright, so now while that's, I dried out my brush, kind of just quickly blend in between, and I go to the next color, which is just the straight blue. Now we're finally to our medium tones here, the medium. I'm going to go ahead and put that right next to it. Look at that. Rinse out my brush, dry out my brush, squeegee my brush, right? Blend in between. Look at that. Alright, so now I have the straight turquoise, but we need a medium in between that. So I'm going to put this here, take my turquoise, more turquoise, because that wasn't enough, mix. You can see that really the key to gradations is that you have to work fast. You know, it's not one of those things, oh, I'll just do one section today and do the next section tomorrow. No, it doesn't quite work that way, especially with acrylics. Oils, you could probably get away with that, but not so much acrylics. And I wouldn't use oil on this because, you know, you need it to dry quickly. Alright, so now I had that dry in between. Rinse that up. Dry, squeegee it because that was too much water. And blend in between. Okay, my last color, turquoise. Put that in. Look at that. Okay, dry out my brush. Rinse out my brush, dry out my brush, squeegee my brush. Okay, and then I cut, while it's still wet, I blend that upward. And now I have my fade. That's a fade. This right here, not so much. But I needed that as my base. I had white underneath there, 2 coats of white, then my yellow, then that blue, that medium blue, and that turquoise, right? So yellow, medium blue, turquoise, that's what happened. I let that dry. That is something you can leave alone. And then later, when you do your gradations, it comes out a little bit. Sometimes you end up looking back and you go, oh no, I messed up an area. Can I go back on top? Yes. Rinse out your brush. Dry out your brush. If you have too much water, it might lift it by accident. What do I mean lift it? It's the paint. I mean, it might lift the paint layer from underneath upward and peel it out, essentially. So I just dried that up. Oh, much better. See that? That's a nice fade. Alright, so I'd let that dry. I'm going to do the 2 other sections, which gets me to this other one. My fades are done on that. That means I can take my glazing medium. Sometimes it's called gel medium, but you do have to make sure that your brush is clean. Dry out your brush. Again, for this type of project, because this is absorbent, you don't want too much water in your brush. It's not like the watercolor paper. And then I put this over. When it dries, They'll be nice and shiny like that other one I showed you, right? You would do that all over. You let it dry, like this one, and then